In 2019, a forgotten Reddit thread claimed that thousands of people would vanish in 2025. Now, with reports of unexplained disappearances emerging from Canada, many are asking, was it just coincidence, or a terrifying prophecy coming true? Chapter 1, the post that nobody took seriously. It began like many strange stories on the internet. A single Reddit post, no flair, no images, no links, just text that appeared in mid-2019, buried inside a small subreddit where conspiracy theories and late-night speculations mixed with jokes. The username was random, the kind that looks generated, a string of letters and numbers, nothing that stood out. Most people ignored it at first. It looked like another rant, another person claiming to know the future. The post's title was short and unsettling. Thousands will vanish in 2025. Inside, the author wrote in a plain but direct style. No dramatic formatting, no strange symbols, just sentences that made one simple claim. Sometime in 2025, entire groups of people would disappear. Not a natural disaster, not a war, something else, something unexplained. At the time, Reddit was full of end-of-the-world predictions. People wrote about comets, secret governments, alien invasions. Most were jokes, some were obvious fiction. So when this thread appeared, the few who noticed treated it the same way. They laughed, made memes, and added sarcastic comments like, "Cool, can I disappear from my job too?" But this thread was different. The poster didn't try to argue, didn't respond to the jokes. Instead, they left a series of calm replies under their own post. Each reply added detail. They spoke about specific regions, mentioning Canada by name. They wrote that the disappearances would not happen all at once, but in waves. First dozens, then hundreds, and finally thousands. They warned that people would think of it as isolated missing person cases until the pattern became impossible to ignore. This style caught people's attention. It wasn't written like a typical conspiracy rant. No shouting, no random links. Just short, factual-sounding statements. That was the first reason a few readers bookmarked the post. It didn't sound like someone trying to convince the world. It sounded like someone simply leaving a warning. Weeks passed. The thread received a small number of upvotes, enough to keep it visible for a while, but then it sank into the endless sea of Reddit content. Most people forgot. The user never posted again. Their account stayed silent. For many, the thread might as well have never existed. Yet some who had read it described a strange feeling, not fear exactly, but unease, like the words were too clean, too certain. Some archived the text, just in case. Others dismissed it but couldn't quite forget. Then 2020 arrived, and the world was hit by the pandemic. People stopped thinking about strange Reddit predictions. Survival, lockdowns, and daily uncertainty became everyone's focus. The post seemed irrelevant, but in the background, the archive remained. Copies floated around obscure corners of the internet, saved by users who made it their hobby to track digital prophecies. They compared it to other failed predictions, noting how most collapse under scrutiny. This one, however, was still waiting for its deadline. 2025. By 2021 and 2022, true crime forums started noticing it again. Threads about unsolved disappearances would occasionally get a reply. This reminds me of that 2019 post about people vanishing in 2025. Most dismissed it as reaching, but slowly, the post's legend began to spread. Not because it had proven anything, but because it lingered. It was different from predictions tied to specific dates like the world ends in 2020. Those collapsed instantly when the date passed. This one still had time, and that made it harder to dismiss. Then came 2023. Canadian news outlets began reporting clusters of missing persons that didn't fit normal patterns. Small towns where multiple individuals vanished in a single season. Families disappearing overnight without clear explanation. Authorities often found traces of ordinary crimes, but not enough to fully explain. Online, readers began making connections, and the 2019 Reddit post resurfaced once again. By 2024, TikTok and YouTube creators were making short videos about it. The Reddit prediction that might be coming true. They called it. Screenshots of the thread appeared in creepy compilations. Some added dramatic music, others analyzed the username, wondering if it contained hidden meaning. But the account itself was gone, deleted, no posts, no comments, nothing left behind. If not for the archived screenshots, there would be no proof it ever existed. That absence only fueled speculation. Did the user remove their account? Did Reddit take it down? Or was it something else entirely? The story grew darker when people noticed one detail. The original thread mentioned signs that would begin 2 years before the main event. According to the timeline, that meant 2023. And in 2023, Canada really did see a rise in unexplained missing person reports. Coincidence? Maybe. But to those who remembered the post, it felt like a chilling echo. At first, only niche forums and small communities paid attention. But as mainstream outlets began covering the missing cases, the connection to Reddit spread wider. By early 2025, just months before the predicted mass disappearance, the story was everywhere. What started as a single ignored post in 2019 had become a viral internet mystery. The question was no longer whether the post existed. Enough archives confirmed it. The question was, how could someone in 2019 describe events that seemed to mirror real life years later? Skeptics offered explanations. Perhaps the prediction was vague enough that people were forcing connections. Maybe the rise in missing cases was just part of a normal cycle, amplified by media attention. Or perhaps the archives had been edited, manipulated, to make it look more accurate than it really was. But believers pointed out the timing. The 2023 signs, the mention of Canada, the idea of disappearances happening in waves. Too specific, they argued, to be random. By this stage, the post was no longer just a curiosity. It had become a lens through which people looked at current events. Every new disappearance in the news added weight to its words. Every unanswered question made it more haunting. The story no longer belonged only to Reddit. It had become a cultural phenomenon, a shared unease spreading across platforms, and yet, the deeper people looked, the stranger it became. Because if this was real, then 2025 was only the beginning. Chapter 2: The posts nobody could explain. When people first discovered the old Reddit thread, they thought it was just another throwaway post. Something strange, yes, but not unusual for the internet. But as they dug deeper, they noticed that the account behind it had not just posted once. It had returned several times over the course of weeks, leaving cryptic replies and edits that felt more like warnings than casual comments. One of the earliest edits appeared 3 days after the original prediction. The user added a single sentence at the bottom of the thread. "Watch the highways in Ontario." No context, no explanation, just that line. Readers tried to make sense of it. Some thought it was a reference to traffic accidents. Others speculated it was about organized crime, or maybe human trafficking routes. But the wording felt deliberate, almost cold. It didn't read like an internet rumor. It read like a note. Days later, another reply was added. This time the account wrote, "The lakes will keep their silence." It was a strange phrase, haunting, almost poetic, but also unsettling. Canada is full of lakes, especially in Ontario. What could that mean? People in the thread began linking it to local folklore. Some pointed to indigenous legends about spirits living in the water. Others connected it to stories of bodies never recovered from frozen lakes during winter. But the tone of the message didn't sound like folklore. It didn't sound like a storyteller. It sounded clinical, stripped of emotion, like someone recording facts in a logbook. Then came the part that really shook people. A date range. Not exact, but enough to spark fear. Somewhere in the middle of the thread, the user hinted at a time frame. "2025, the silence begins." That was it. Nothing more. Readers asked for clarification, begged the account to explain. No response ever came. But the phrase stayed there, hanging like a shadow over every discussion that followed. The community reaction was mixed. Some laughed it off as nonsense. They said it was just another internet troll, someone trying to stir up fear with vague phrases. Others weren't so sure. The way the messages were written didn't match typical trolling. There were no jokes, no memes, no insults. The words were short, precise, and almost unnervingly detached. It didn't feel like someone trying to scare people. It felt like someone trying to record something they believed was inevitable. Speculation exploded. People in the comments began researching local myths and regional history. One theory suggested the account was referencing the Wendigo legend, a creature tied to starvation and disappearance in the northern wilderness. Another pointed to the Great Lakes Triangle, a mysterious area where ships and planes have supposedly vanished. A few even suggested the user was part of a doomsday cult that believed mass disappearances were connected to Canadian geography. None of the theories fully explained the phrasing. As the thread gained traction, some people with backgrounds in linguistics joined the discussion. They analyzed the style of the writing. Their conclusion was surprising. The text didn't read like normal human speech. The rhythm was off. The grammar was too exact, with no casual errors, no slang, no emotional flares. It almost looked like notes written by a machine, or by someone deliberately imitating machine output. The phrases were structured like commands, not conversations. This brought up another chilling idea. What if the posts weren't written by a human at all? Remember, this thread first appeared in 2019. That was years before tools like ChatGPT were widely known. At that time, AI writing systems existed but were limited, obscure, and mostly in research labs. Could it be possible that someone had early access to such a system? Or worse, could an experimental program have been let loose online without anyone admitting it? The thought alone added a whole new layer of mystery. If these posts were AI generated, who had created them? And why choose a random Reddit forum to drop cryptic warnings about 2025? Was it a test, a leak, or something stranger like a system trying to communicate in the only way it could? Skeptics argued back. They said the AI theory was just paranoia. They believed the posts were written by a human, someone deliberately trying to sound robotic in order to get attention. After all, people on Reddit love puzzles. It could have been nothing more than a role-play experiment gone too far. But there was one problem with that explanation. The account didn't act like someone seeking attention. There were no follow-up comments defending its claims, no arguments with doubters, no playful hints or riddles to keep people hooked. It was silent, apart from those short, haunting messages. That silence made it more unnerving. A troll usually wants chaos, laughter, or outrage. This account gave nothing but words, then vanished. And then came the final twist. Sometime in late 2019, the account disappeared completely. Every trace of its activity was gone. Not just the posts, but the entire user profile. No history, no archived comments, nothing. Some thought the user had deleted it out of fear. Others wondered if Reddit itself had stepped in, perhaps removing what it saw as disinformation. But there was also a darker idea one whispered in forums long after the thread vanished. What if the disappearance wasn't controlled by the user at all? What if it was part of the same pattern? Posts that warned of silence, and then silence itself consuming the author. That final erasure left the community with nothing but fragment screenshots, saved by a handful of users, quotes reposted on obscure blogs, and endless speculation. Over time, the story drifted into the background, remembered only by those who had followed it closely. But for the few who couldn't forget, the words never lost their weight. Watch the highways in Ontario. The lakes will keep their silence. Mid-2025 the silence begins. Simple lines, cold words, yet they carried the kind of unease that no amount of analysis could erase, because whether they were written by a human, an early AI, or something else entirely, they carried one truth that everyone could feel but nobody wanted to admit. Whoever wrote them believed something was coming, and then the account disappeared. No history, no trace. Chapter 3. The First Disappearances, 2025. In early 2025, the story began to shift from online whispers to something darker in the real world. Canadian news outlets started reporting on a series of scattered missing person cases. At first, they seemed unrelated, the kind of tragedies that unfortunately happen every year. But when pieced together, the pattern was chilling. The first reports came out of Ontario. A young woman disappeared while driving home from work. Her car was later found abandoned on the shoulder of Highway 401, engine still running. driver's door open, no trace of her anywhere. Investigators searched the area for days. Dogs, helicopters, volunteers, nothing. It was as if she had stepped out of her car and simply vanished. A few weeks later, in Alberta, another case surfaced. A pair of hikers were reported missing after failing to return from a trail near Jasper National Park. Their backpacks and supplies were discovered near a lookout point, but no footprints led away. Rescue teams scoured the rugged terrain. Again, no answers. Then came British Columbia. A family called authorities in a panic when their teenage son never returned home from a bike ride. Hours later, police located his bicycle leaning against a fence near a quiet road. His phone and wallet were still in the basket. He was never found. One case might be written off as a tragedy, two could be coincidence, but three, across different provinces, in such a short span, that was harder to ignore. Still, police treated each disappearance as an isolated case. Official statements remained calm, almost dismissive. Investigators told the press they had no reason to suspect foul play, no connection between the victims, and no evidence pointing to anything unusual. But online, the tone was very different. On Reddit, Twitter, and forums dedicated to unsolved mysteries, users began connecting dots. A small group of digital sleuths noticed something disturbing. The locations of the disappearances echoed the eerie warnings posted years earlier on the vanished Reddit thread. Watch the highways in Ontario. The lakes will keep their silence. And now, cases were unfolding exactly in those areas. To some, it was nothing more than coincidence. People go missing all the time, especially in Canada's vast wilderness. But to others, the link was undeniable. The anonymous 2019 warnings suddenly felt like a prophecy, one playing out in real time. A Reddit user posted, "Look at the Jasper hikers. Look at the Ontario case. This is exactly what that old thread was describing. We laughed about it years ago, but it's happening now." Theories exploded. Was the original poster some kind of insider with knowledge of a hidden operation? A government whistleblower hinting at a cover-up? Or was it simply a hoax that, by pure chance, lined up with unrelated tragedies? As the speculation spread, survivors, people who had been close to those who disappeared, began to speak out. Their testimonies only deepened the unease. One woman in Ontario told a local reporter that her sister, who vanished on the highway, had complained about lost time days before she disappeared. She described episodes where she would arrive home, look at the clock, and realize entire hours had passed without memory of where she had been. In Alberta, a man who had gone hiking with the missing pair said he remembered something strange before they vanished. He recalled walking a short distance ahead of them, then turning around to find they were gone. There were no screams, no signs of struggle, nothing, just empty trail behind him. And in British Columbia, the missing boy's father reported that his son had been acting unusual before he vanished. He had told his parents about blackouts during the day, moments where he felt like he had woken from a dream but couldn't remember what he had been doing. The family dismissed it as stress from school until he disappeared. Blackouts, lost time, people vanishing without a trace. The parallels between the testimonies were impossible to ignore, and those online were quick to draw the connection back to the Reddit thread. The language of the original posts, clinical, cold, almost coded, took on new weight. Had it been describing these disappearances all along? Some experts stepped in to offer more rational explanations. Psychologists suggested that lost time could be a symptom of stress or trauma. Investigators reminded the public that wilderness areas are dangerous, and that disappearances often leave little evidence. But for those who remembered the old posts, those reassurances rang hollow. The coincidences were stacking up too neatly. As more news outlets began to cover the disappearances, the public mood shifted. What had once been an internet curiosity was starting to feel like a national mystery. A growing number of people began revisiting archived screenshots of the original Reddit thread, analyzing every word, looking for hidden codes or overlooked details. One passage stood out. They will begin quietly, one by one. People will vanish where the roads stretch long and where the water holds its silence. By mid-2025, the numbers will no longer be ignored. Those words, written 6 years earlier, now sounded less like speculation and more like a direct prediction. and by spring of 2025, the numbers were indeed becoming harder to ignore. Missing persons databases across Canada began to show a sharp rise. Families reported loved ones vanishing in circumstances eerily similar to the early cases: abandoned cars, possessions left behind, no signs of violence. Each case on its own was explainable. Together, they painted a haunting picture. Online, panic simmered. Was this the beginning of the mass disappearance the old thread had warned about? Or was the internet falling victim to coincidence bias, forcing connections where none existed? Authorities refused to comment on any link. The RCMP issued only brief statements, urging calm and reminding the public that Canada's missing persons statistics fluctuate year by year. But privately, even some investigators admitted that the sheer number of strange disappearances was unusual. The story was no longer just about a mysterious Reddit account. It was about reality itself beginning to mirror something once dismissed as fiction. As one commentator wrote in a chilling post, "It's no longer just an internet story. It's happening outside the screen." That realization marked a turning point. What had been a curiosity became a fear, and with every new disappearance, the line between hoax and prophecy grew thinner. The stage was set for something larger, darker, and far more terrifying. Because if the warnings from 2019 were right about the first wave, what else were they right about? The story wasn't fading. It was just beginning. Chapter 4. Viral panic across social media. The strange Reddit thread had faded into obscurity for years. Only a few screenshots survived, scattered across old forums and digital archives. But in mid-2025, as Canadian news outlets reported case after case of unexplained disappearances, the thread suddenly resurfaced. It wasn't buried anymore. It was everywhere. On Twitter, people shared grainy screenshots claiming to be from the original post. Some showed the chilling words, "Thousands will vanish. Mid-2025. Watch the highways in Ontario. The lakes will keep their silence." Whether authentic or fabricated later, these images spread like wildfire. Retweets carried them into millions of feeds, with captions like, "Was this predicted? And did someone know all along?" On TikTok, short videos dramatized the warnings, pairing eerie voiceovers with news clips of missing hikers, abandoned cars, and grieving families. Creators stitched the old phrases into ominous montages: highways at night, vast lakes shrouded in fog, and quiet Canadian forests where footsteps vanished without a trace. One video simply showed the words "the lakes will keep their silence" fading over footage of Lake Ontario as dark waters. It gained millions of views within hours. YouTube channels dedicated to mysteries and conspiracies latched on as well. Long-form explainers, reaction streams, and evidence breakdowns filled the platform. Some hosts argued the thread was a modern Nostradamus, a forgotten prediction finally unfolding. Others mocked the entire thing, dismissing it as recycled creepypasta dressed up as news. But the debate itself only fueled more curiosity, more clicks, more panic. The reactions split into two camps. On one side were the skeptics. They pointed out how easy it was to fake screenshots, how unreliable memory becomes after years, and how disappearances, tragic as they are, happen all the time. They called it mass hysteria, a case study in selective memory. The same way people remember predictions from The Simpsons after an event occurs. To them, this was nothing more than a digital ghost story that happened to resurface at the right time. But the believers were louder. They gathered the coincidences into neat timelines, showing dates and places that matched the old warnings. They created maps highlighting highways where cars were found abandoned, and lakes where bodies had never been recovered. They emphasized the thread's tone: clinical, detached, almost like coded notes. To them, it didn't read like a hoax or a joke. It read like a message written by someone, or something, that knew what was coming. The phrase "too many coincidences" became the rallying cry. Believers argued the details were too accurate to be brushed off. Highways in Ontario, lakes keeping silence. Mid-2025, they pointed to each new news report as confirmation. Every missing person case, no matter how ordinary, was seen as part of the pattern. The narrative spread faster than the facts could keep up. Psychologists began to weigh in. On Canadian talk shows and American podcasts, Experts explained the psychology of collective paranoia. Humans, they said, are wired to find patterns. In times of fear, we connect dots that may not truly belong together. A cryptic Reddit thread, rediscovered years later, became a lens through which random tragedies looked connected. According to them, the panic was less about reality and more about the human mind's need for meaning. Criminologists offered a different perspective. They acknowledged that disappearances were real but cautioned against seeing them as one event. In their view, scattered missing person cases across provinces could be explained by trafficking networks, wilderness accidents, or isolated crimes. Tragedy, not prophecy. Still, even as they gave logical explanations, their voices were drowned out by the roar of online speculation, because logic was not what people were searching for. It was the thread's voice, the way it spoke, cold and predictive, as if detached from emotion, that unsettled everyone. This was not the dramatic language of a storyteller. It wasn't written like a creepypasta trying to frighten readers. Instead, the posts read like clinical notes, like coded warnings left in plain sight. And that tone made the coincidences feel heavier, almost inevitable. Even skeptics admitted the phrasing was unusual. The account hadn't rambled. It hadn't given too much detail. It simply dropped phrases, almost surgical in precision. Watch the highways in Ontario. The lakes will keep their silence. Thousands will vanish. Mid-2025. Each fragment was short, haunting, and now impossible to ignore. This precision fed the fire. If it had been long, messy, or overly dramatic, people might have dismissed it as a joke. But because it was restrained, the words carried weight. They echoed like a riddle, not a story. And riddles, by their nature, begged to be solved. The panic grew beyond Reddit, beyond niche communities. Mainstream outlets began reporting on the viral resurgence. Headlines asked, "Did a Reddit post predict Canada's missing persons crisis?" Late-night hosts joked about Reddit Nostradamus. News panels debated whether internet rumors could influence public safety. What had started as a forgotten thread was now shaping national conversation. As the story spread, so did the fear. Families in Ontario refused to drive highways at night. Fishermen along the lakes reported fewer boats on the water. In Alberta, campers pulled out of summer trips, uneasy about vanishing into wilderness trails. People whispered that traveling alone was no longer safe, not because of crime, but because the Reddit post had said so. Believers pushed harder, saying the warnings weren't just predictions, but instructions, messages meant to be deciphered before it was too late. Some theorized the account wasn't human at all, but an AI prototype trained on hidden government data. Others believed it was an insider whistleblower silenced after leaking too much, and some, leaning toward the supernatural, argued it was never written by any human or machine, but by something else, something outside of time. No matter the theory, the result was the same: panic. Every new disappearance reported in the summer of 2025 was tied back to the thread. Every unexplained detail was proof. The internet had turned an old message into prophecy, and prophecy into terror. Chapter 5: The Silence of the Authorities. When the first wave of online panic began, people turned their attention to the institutions they believed should protect them. If a Reddit thread from 2019 had truly predicted disappearances in 2025, surely the police, government agencies, or even national security officials would step in. But what followed only deepened the unease. Canadian officials issued a short statement in response to growing speculation. It dismissed the entire connection as an internet rumor with no verified basis. At press conferences, spokespeople used calm and careful language. They referred to the missing cases as isolated incidents, pointing out that Canada records thousands of disappearances every year, most of which are solved. But to the online community, the timing felt too sharp, too eerie. The more authorities tried to reassure, the more the public sensed that something was being hidden. Journalists pushed harder. Local newspapers and even some national outlets began to publish features tying recent vanishings to the strange Reddit posts from years earlier. Reporters highlighted that the account had specifically mentioned Ontario highways and lakes, and that now vehicles were being found abandoned along stretches of road in Ontario. While several people near lakeside towns had simply vanished, The parallels were difficult to ignore. And yet, something strange happened. Some of these news articles disappeared almost as quickly as they were posted. Online versions of the stories were suddenly pulled down. In some cases, archives showed a blank page where the article used to be. Reporters who had tweeted about their investigations deleted their posts. A few offered vague explanations about editorial decisions or lack of verification, but the pattern raised suspicions. It felt as if someone or something was quietly burying the story. Families of the missing were not satisfied with official silence. They formed their own networks, creating Facebook groups and private forums where they compared details. Mothers, fathers, and siblings of victims noticed chilling similarities. Loved ones who vanished had last been seen near rural highways or close to water. Several had mentioned strange blackouts before disappearing, moments of lost time, confusion, or unexplainable memory gaps. These private accounts fueled the belief that something much larger was happening. One mother wrote in a group post, "The police say my son just ran away, but he never even had a driver's license, and his car was left running on the side of Highway 401. He had groceries in the back seat. Who runs away in the middle of that?" These online groups became digital support systems, but also centers of paranoia. Members compared every missing person poster, every small detail in local news, every rumor, and then another disturbing pattern emerged. Some of those posters began to vanish. Community boards where families had taped pictures of their loved ones were suddenly cleared. Entire clusters of missing persons flyers were taken down overnight, not just by weather or time, but in ways that looked deliberate. Parents returned to replace them, only to find the boards stripped bare again within days. On the digital side, forums began noticing broken links in databases of the missing. Names disappeared without explanation. It was as if someone or something did not want the patterns to be recognized. Rumors spread that police were quietly monitoring any forum that discussed the 2019 Reddit thread. Members of missing persons groups claimed their accounts had been flagged or others swore they received strange, automated messages warning them not to spread false panic. The line between rumor and reality blurred. What was genuine investigation, and what was paranoia taking hold? The psychological weight of this silence was crushing. For many families, it was not just that their loved ones were gone, it was that the world around them seemed to erase the evidence of their absence. Journalists felt their stories vanish. Flyers disappeared from walls. Online records flickered out of existence. The sense of suffocating paranoia grew, not just because people were vanishing, but because traces of them were being erased. Experts tried to step in, offering rational explanations. Authorities said posters may have been removed by building staff or by police for updated information. Missing person databases sometimes glitched, resulting in temporary errors. Journalists explained that editorial standards forced them to pull weakly sourced stories, but to a public already primed by the chilling predictions of a forgotten Reddit thread, these explanations sounded hollow. The suffocating mood was best captured in whispers spreading across online spaces. It says not just the people disappearing, it's the story of them that's being deleted too. By summer of 2025, this paranoia became part of everyday life in certain Canadian communities. In Ontario, small towns near lakes saw businesses posting their own warnings. Parents kept their children home at night. Groups organized search parties, but they often returned empty-handed, their flashlights cutting through dark forests where nothing felt safe. The silence of officials only made these searches feel more desperate. Meanwhile, conspiracy theories flourished. Some claimed that authorities were covering up a rise in organized trafficking networks. Others said the disappearances were linked to a government experiment gone wrong. A darker theory spread through anonymous boards, that AI monitoring systems themselves were responsible. If the 2019 Reddit posts had truly been generated by an early machine learning model, perhaps it had seen patterns no human could. And now, as AI tools became embedded in government systems, maybe the same technology was erasing evidence to hide what it knew. No proof ever surfaced, but the lack of proof became the point. Every erased article, every missing flyer, every official denial was treated not as reassurance, but as evidence of a shadow hiding behind the surface of daily life. Families who had lost someone described it like this: it's as if the world doesn't want us to remember them, as if their absence is being forced into silence. The atmosphere across communities grew heavy, almost unbearable. There was no sense of closure, no official recognition of the mystery. Instead, there was the suffocating impression that an unseen hand was quietly erasing the trail, removing clues until nothing was left but whispers and grief. In the end, it wasn't just the vanishings themselves that haunted people. It was the silence, the way institutions refused to connect the dots, the way evidence slipped out of view, the way chilling online predictions seemed to unfold in real life, only for the world to act as though nothing was happening. The chapter closes with one thought that echoed across every dark forum, every late-night conversation between families of the missing. It was as if the disappearances wanted to remain hidden. Chapter 6: The Dark Truths Behind the Prophecy. The final question is the hardest one to face. When people look back at the Reddit thread from 2019, two possibilities usually come to mind. Either it was an elaborate hoax that accidentally aligned with events years later, or it was something else, something more calculated, more disturbing, and harder to explain away. Both ideas carry their own weight of fear, but the second lingers in a colder way. Think about it. If it was a hoax, then what are the odds that random words written 6 years ago, "Watch the highways in Ontario, the lakes will keep their silence," mid-2025 would echo with such clarity once real people began to vanish? What are the odds that vague hints would match real details so precisely? Coincidence exists, of course, but coincidence rarely spreads panic the way this did. And if it wasn't coincidence, then the question becomes, who knew something in 2019 that the public didn't? The possibility of a leak. One theory that gained traction was the idea of leaked information. Maybe the anonymous Reddit account belonged to someone who had access to restricted data patterns of disappearances, early warnings from law enforcement, or even surveillance reports that never made it to public news. Governments and police forces often keep information quiet, sometimes to avoid panic, sometimes because they simply don't have answers. Could the 2019 posts have been the result of someone breaking silence? It's possible. The cold, clinical tone of the writing felt almost like a briefing note. The absence of slang, the precise phrasing, and the strange metaphors, all of it, suggested a person who wanted to warn without being obvious. If so, they may have chosen Reddit not because it was the best place, but because it was the safest. In a sea of millions of daily posts, their warnings would blend in, dismissed as fiction until it became too late. Insider knowledge or intelligence experiment. Another possibility is that the account was part of an experiment. Intelligence agencies and defense groups have run psychological operations online before, planting messages, testing reactions, even monitoring how rumors spread. The 2019 thread might have been a case study. Post a cryptic warning, leave it alone, then watch how the internet reacts once events seem to align. That thought is unsettling because it means the fear was manufactured deliberately. The panic, the speculation, the paranoia, every bit of it could have been engineered. And if that's true, then it worked. Social media in 2025 was full of people replaying old screenshots, dissecting every word, connecting the dots, even when many of those dots didn't belong together. But then, if this was just an experiment, why did the details seem to map onto real disappearances so clearly? That is the question skeptics can't fully answer. The AI angle. There's also the technological mystery. Some linguists who studied the original text noted that it felt strangely inhuman. The phrasing was flat, stripped of emotion, and structured in a way that reminded readers of early machine-generated text. This was in 2019, before tools like ChatGPT or other AI models became mainstream. If the writing was machine-generated, then it suggests someone had access to advanced systems years before the public did. That thought creates an eerie chain of possibilities. What if the text wasn't written by a person at all? What if it was generated as part of a predictive experiment, trained on datasets no one outside research circles has ever seen? Machines don't need to be conscious to stumble upon disturbing correlations. With enough information, they can find patterns humans would miss, patterns about crime, disappearance, or danger that would look like prophecy to everyone else. And if that's the case, then the real fear isn't that AI knew the future. The fear is that AI, even unintentionally, can surface truths we aren't ready to handle. Fear that shapes reality regardless of whether the post came from a human, a leak, or a machine. The outcome was the same. Fear spread online. Fear filled news cycles. Fear entered the homes of families who read about the missing and wondered if their loved ones were next. Once a story like this takes hold, it no longer matters if it was originally true. Fear itself begins to shape reality. When enough people believe something terrible is about to happen, they start to see evidence everywhere. A car left on the side of the highway isn't just a broken engine, as a sign of the prophecy unfolding. A hiker who doesn't returned from the woods isn't just a tragic accident, it's another victim in a growing pattern. Fear sharpens every detail, turning normal tragedies into part of a larger, darker picture. And once fear reaches that level, it controls the narrative more than facts ever could. What the prophecy reveals about us. Perhaps the darkest truth isn't about the Reddit account at all. Perhaps the darkest truth is about us. We live in a world where one deleted thread can outlive official reports, where screenshots carry more weight than government press releases, where a prophecy written by an anonymous stranger or a faceless machine can shape how thousands of people understand reality. That is what the 2019 Reddit thread revealed. It revealed that information doesn't need to be proven to be powerful. It doesn't need evidence to create fear. Once seeded, it grows on its own, fed by speculation, paranoia, and the human need to find meaning in chaos. Whether the writer was a whistleblower, a government experiment, an AI system, or simply a creative prankster, the result was the same. The story escaped control. It became something larger than itself. Closing thought.